So how do you build trust in a moment of unbelievably low trust in all of our public institutions, especially the mainstream press? I don't think it's by pretending like we can go back to having a view from nowhere. I think it's about who's in the room, right? I think it's about redrawing the lines of what falls in the 40-yard lines of acceptable debate and acceptable American politics and culture.
Welcome back to Posting Through It. I'm Jared.
And I'm Mike.
We got to give a shout out off the top to one of our newest Patreon premium subscribers, Phoebe Needs Coffee. I hope you get that coffee, Phoebe. If you want to be like Phoebe, buy us some coffee, perhaps. You can sign up for the Patreon. There's a link in the description. You'll get access to our weekly premium episodes, including the last one, where we talked about a bunch of right-wing losers going to the club and having the worst night you could possibly have at the club. People getting fired, you're banned from the club, the mayor denounces you. Whatever regrets you may have had in the club, it falls short of this, I promise.
That plus homicidal Norwegian black metal bands.
And on that note, send us your music. If you make music and you listen to this show, kick it our way. The transition tracks this week are from a listener we have in Scotland named Gavino, who reached out to me on Blue Sky. So in between segments and at the end, you'll hear bits and pieces from his band's latest single. The name of the song is 5 After Dark, and the band is called Diving Horse.
Nice.
I'll put a link to that in the description as well. So in this episode, we're going to be talking about Bari Weiss, the new Queen Bee of CBS News. But before we start the episode, we also want to acknowledge that on January 24th, masked federal agents shot and killed another person in the streets of Minneapolis. His name was Alex Preddy. He was 37 years old and worked as an intensive care nurse at the Veterans Administration.
Like the killing of Renee Good on January 7th, Alex Preddy's death was captured on camera by others in the area. What the video shows is clear to us. Federal Border Patrol agents are roughing up some women, and when Alex Preddy steps in to film them and puts his body between the agents and the women, they descend on him. We can see agents using chemical irritants, aka pepper spray, against him, tacking him to the ground, and then shooting him dead in the street. And some of the footage appears to show one of the ICE agents celebrating this in slowed down footage.
DHS and other federal officials, similar to what they did after Renee Good's death, have justified Alex Preddy's death by claiming that he was a domestic terrorist of some sort who posed a deadly threat to their agents. The Trump administration said that Alex Preddy had a handgun in his possession at the time they killed him, claiming he resisted when they tried to disarm him. According to family members, Preddy was licensed in Minnesota to concealed carry his firearm, and video appears to show federal agents disarming him before executing him in the street. When pressed for evidence of those claims, Border Patrol Commander Greg Bovino dodged the question.
There's no evidence that he was perpetrating violence. And there's no evidence, unless you have it, and we'd love to see it if there is, that he was intending to massacre law enforcement, other than the fact that he was there and he had a gun lawfully.
He meant to be there beforehand. Again, Dana, he came there beforehand.
How do you know that?
A reason.
How do you know that?
Because he was there.
But all he was doing was filming and documenting it, which is legal. He was carrying a gun, which in Minneapolis is legal.
I didn't say it wasn't. And I didn't say it wasn't legal.
So then what did he do that was illegal?
Assault federal law enforcement when he does that. That's an active law enforcement crime scene.
Where do you see in the video that he was
decided to enter into?
Where do you see in the video that he was assaulting law enforcement? Because from everything we have seen, law enforcement was assaulting him when he was there trying to help another individual.
Dana, law enforcement doesn't assault anyone. Follow directions of law enforcement. Follow directions of law enforcement in an active crime scene. It's very evident he didn't want to do that. very evident that the other individuals didn't want to do that.
Minnesota Governor Tim Walz called the federal government's retelling of what happened nonsense and lies. Here's a clip of that.
Speak out, bear witness, and document legally. But I understand the risk in that. And I understand the courage that it takes to have people out there doing this. Thank God we have video. Because according to DHS, these 7 heroic guys took an onslaught of a battalion against them or something. It's nonsense, people. It is nonsense and it's lies.
So a reminder that filming these guys is pretty useful.
And we know most of what we know about what's happening in Minneapolis because ordinary people are getting out in the street, filming it, and sharing that footage.
Here is a statement from Preddy's parents. This is tough for me because it's pretty emotional. We are heartbroken, but also very angry. Alex was a kind-hearted soul who cared deeply for his family and friends, and also the American veterans whom he cared for as an ICU nurse at the Minneapolis VA hospital. Alex wanted to make a difference in this world. Unfortunately, he would not be with us to see his impact. I do not throw around the hero term lightly. However, his last thought and act was to protect a woman. The sickening lies told about our son by the administration are reprehensible and disgusting. Alex is clearly not holding a gun when attacked by Trump's murdering and cowardly ICE thugs. He had his phone in his right hand, and his empty left hand was raised above his head while trying to protect the woman ICE just pushed down, all while being pepper sprayed. Please get the truth out about our son. He was a good man. Thank you.
So this situation is still developing. One of the latest things to happen at the time we're recording this is Attorney General Pam Bondi more or less telling Minnesota Governor Tim Walz that ICE might leave the state if they turned over Minnesota's voter rolls to the Department of Justice. I may have more to say about that and how I really feel about that when we're behind a paywall on our premium episodes, Mike.
Well, we'll have more time to look at what some of these bastards have said about it. Some of the people that we cover, and I don't like to use that word. I try to keep my objective journalism cap on, but this is so egregious. These recent executions, in particular, it to me shows a willingness to justify almost anything that we might see going forward from MAGA, and it's really difficult to stomach.
So we're going to cover this a lot more on Thursday's episode, but this week we're talking about Bari Weiss. We've got Justin Baragona, senior reporter for The Independent. He covers media, politics, culture. You may have also read his work in Zeteo, The Daily Beast, and other outlets. Justin is also, most importantly, part of the fantasy football league that Mike runs. Justin, can you remind us what the name of your fantasy team was this year?
It is Tucker's Right About Everything.
Thank you. Just an awesome guy. Also, I just want to add, just a sensitive, wonderful person. So happy to have you on.
Justin, you cover media. You have for a long time. Something that I've seen some people noting, and I've seen a little bit myself, is that compared to January 7th, when Border Patrol agents killed Renee Good, the reactions to the killing of Alex Preddy seem a little different. You know, when Renee Good was killed, there seemed to be this rush to justify it, rationalize it to some degree. And while that's certainly happening in right-wing media after these agents killed Alex Preddy, there seems to maybe be some fault lines. I'm curious, as somebody who reports on media and who spends an awful lot of time watching this stuff, if you agree with that read or what you've been seeing.
I'd say there's a little bit more of a mixed reaction than we saw after Renee Good's killing. At that time, they all circled the wagons extremely quickly and parroted the administration's narrative that, Renee Good was trying to run over the ICE agents and use her car as a weapon in a bit of domestic terrorism, and therefore the shooting was justified, and that they could just quickly move on from that, and they don't need to investigate it because we already saw the truth, according to the administration, that she was using that car as a weapon. So that narrative really, they all jumped on that. Now with this one, you have, DHS, Bovino, Trump himself, basically saying that this guy, Alex Preddy, essentially deserved to be killed for just carrying a firearm near ICE. I mean, however much we want to kind of parse through the words that they're saying, that's the talking point, boiled down. That flies in the face of everything that conservative media has been defending and pushing for the last few decades, which is that we need an armed population, and every lawful citizen should be able to have a gun on their person at any time, and that we shouldn't even have gun-free zones.
Didn't they have also a lot of justification whether you could use your car to kind of push people out of the way too, right? There had been a bunch of things like that too. They just keep
correct, yeah.
They just keep on rewriting the rules, it seems like. And also I just want to underscore that Renee Good was very obviously not doing that. She was trying to respond to their wishes to get them out of the way. But yeah, they were trying to do the same thing with cars that they've done with for years with guns.
What you have is a bunch of influencers, media figures, political figures that have made the Second Amendment, combined with the First Amendment, their major issue about how we should have gun rights and free speech. And in this instance, you have a man who is just there observing what ICE was doing, and then coming to the aid of another observer, and then he was dogpiled, sprayed in the face with pepper spray, and then shot in the back while not having a gun in his hand. In fact, that gun was taken from him, from what we could see, based off of the videos. And you have multiple angles of this video, and that's out there on the internet. It's out there on television. So the sort of Second Amendment influencers, for lack of a better term, they're like, wait a minute, are you telling us that if we're concealing and carrying and we have a permit, but we're anywhere near an ICE agent or a police officer, they can justifiably shoot us if they find us annoying? Is that what you're telling us? So that's the big fault line that I'm seeing online. Now, as opposed to the normal MAGA propagandists that are just going to swallow every bit of BS that comes from the Trump administration and then spit it out to their followers because, Trump is right about everything. They're just sticking, they're staying in line. Your Benny Johnsons, your Jack Posobiec's, your Laura Loomers, they're all staying true. And then over at Fox News, you got some little bits of disagreement, but so far over this weekend, when we're recording this, they've been largely staying in line as well and parroting what the administration's saying. I mean, just this morning, I saw Charlie Hurt, who's like the Fox and Friends weekend guy that replaced Pete Hegseth.
Big shoes to fill.
Yeah, so he should be getting an administration job.
Our next Secretary of War.
Yeah. He said only one person could have prevented this from happening, and it's Alex Preddy.
Oh, fuck
what he's
off.
saying this morning.
Well, that seems to be the justification the administration is pushing out. So we're recording this on Sunday morning, and if we seem a bit tentative in how we're talking about this, it's because they still seem to be workshopping, like in public and like testing out kind of what they think is going to work for their talking points. So we're talking about this a certain way. But I saw Greg Bovino kind of making the same point in an interview on CNN with Dana Bash. He's saying, I actually congratulate the law enforcement officers that killed this guy because they stopped what could have been a massacre. And Dana Bash is like, well, what evidence do you have that he was there to hurt police officers? And his thing is basically like, well, he was there, wasn't he?
Yeah.
Which is so insane. But it kind of seems like they're trying to go with that line. They're also looking at people like Tim Walz, other elected officials, and being like, you're encouraging people to go out on the street and protest or organize or observe us, and you're just putting them in harm's way. It almost feels like a confession on their part. But I don't know. I'm curious what will stick. But Justin, a lot of right-wing media is not exactly subtle about the fact that they are embedded and, essentially serve for all intents and purposes as a utility of the Trump administration. They boast their access, they'll be like, we're here on the news channel where this guy rocks. I love this guy. It's not, it's not subtle. But when the administration gets in trouble like this, or maybe even more specifically, as public opposition to the way this administration is going about trying to do immigration enforcement grows, I'm just curious your thoughts on the role that media ecosystem plays.
I mean, first and foremost, their whole raison d'etre is to solidify the GOP base, in their opinion, of, basically just get the conservatives in line and behind whatever action, whatever policy, the current Republican administration is peddling. And if, say, a Republican president is not, in office, then it's about solidifying the opposition to the Democrats that are in power. That's it. That's all that this is about. We can try to dissect it a little bit more, with a little bit more nuance, but that's really all it is. I mean, Fox News is the communication arm of the Republican Party, and now specifically for the Trump administration. I mean, 24 people in the Trump administration were hired directly from Fox News. I mean, there's no subtlety there. I mean, Janine Pirro is the U.S. Attorney in D.C. Pete Hegseth is their Secretary of Defense. Sean Duffy, the real world guy that was also a Fox host, is running both transportation and is the acting head of NASA, I guess, still. I'm not sure.
Well, one could say that's a form of transportation, I suppose.
Yeah. But this is our government now. Our government is a branch of Fox News and Murdoch Media.
It's a Paul Verhoeven vision of American media turned government. I want to ask you a real quick question on that before we, I'm sure, move to Bari Weiss fairly soon. I just want to know, how are they doing, in your opinion? Because my impression is, as a person who more focuses on extremism and doesn't really get into this sort of the daily clip type thing with talking points as much. We do it a lot on here too, actually, quite frankly. But I mean, you do it in a very different way, in a much more analytical way. How are they doing right now? Because my impression is they're not doing well.
Oh, they're floundering. They're scrambling right now. They're trying to figure it out, but they're figuring it out in real time, and they got a weekend to do it. There's a lot of people watching Fox News right now over the weekend, but more will watch it come Monday evening. As Jared was saying earlier, they're workshopping right now. They're trying to figure out what their good talking points are going to be. I can predict, and I'm going to say fairly accurately, that one of the ways they'll get around this on, say, by Monday, Tuesday, is there'll be some kind of, the left is in meltdown over this and over Bobino or whatever, whoever and then they're just going to focus on something somebody on MS Now said, that they're going to say, look at how extreme this is. And then that'll be a lot of their concentration, is about the left's reaction to what happened as opposed to actually defending what is happening. And then they're going to get around to what the best defense is going to be for the actual action if they can. But it's largely going to just be about blaming Democrats, blaming the libs, blaming radical leftists that are out there, probably on the payroll of George Soros and Antifa. The Antifa super soldiers are out there. They're super organized, and they were looking to kill ICE. That'll be basically what Greg Gutfeld and Jesse Waters say tomorrow.
It's like when Andy Ngo, after one of these things where it's just so obvious that somebody aligned with MAGA has done something completely horrible. Maybe in a more objective world would be murder.
Yeah.
And then the first thing he does is he finds some flyer where someone's like stamp the fascists out, and he's like, they want to stamp the fascists in the head, in his dial tone brain. It's like when I see him do that, I'm like, wow, you really, I mean, bro, you have like no morals. You are
it's
like
horrible.
You got to get the little fake British accent going on.
He also has. I also noticed that No did a thing where people were moving around like trash cans and other things, and it's like they have stolen trash cans to create the open but he thinks he's got them on so many things. He's like, the open borders extremists have created a border by stealing trash cans, which is a felony. Like, I mean, it's like it's like anything they can find to distract from what is the obvious thing, which is a guy getting executed in the back of the head.
Yeah, I think that prediction is correct, Justin. So I'm going to declare it now. It's our pick of the week. You can lock that one down with our new sponsor, PodBet, where you can bet on podcasts. Because apparently that's our whole economy now. It's just gambling.
Is this endorsed or supported by Kalshi or
no.
Kalshi, yes.
They can keep the money.
Yeah.
No, we only place bets related to Kash Patel and the various like extracurricular activities he gets.
Side note, and we'll talk about it on the premium, but I don't know if you saw him. He was on Bartiromo, and he was like, I don't know, man. You gotta ask DHS. I don't know, man. I trust them.
I want to start an app where you can gamble away the deed to your house on Kash Patel's Uber Eats orders. Right-wing media is going to be right-wing media. It's in the tank for the Republican Party. Always has been, always will be, probably. But mainstream media is also hugely important, especially network news. And today, the reason we had you on is because you've done a lot of reporting about Bari Weiss, who recently, I guess late last year, was installed into CBS News, one of the legacy huge newsrooms of America and around the world, to lead it as top dog editor, despite having no experience in broadcast news, despite, to my memory, never breaking a news story in her life, actually. I'm always working on the opinion and commentary side of things. And you've done a lot of reporting on Bari, and I think this actually kind of fits together because in a mainstream institution, one of the, big three news channels that even your most basic cable package or your over-the-air rabbit ear antennas can pick up. But I think it would be more than fair to describe her as a conservative media figure, right?
I think that's fair. Yeah. Bari Weiss is definitely an interesting case here. I mean, how much time do we have to talk about her and what she's been doing these last few months? I guess one thing I would say is I'd like to address that, some folks, media reporters who also spend a lot of time covering Bari, sneeringly said that many of us are too obsessed with what's going on at CBS News or Bari Weiss. Dylan Byers said that. And then,
sorry, what was his, what do you mean too obsessed with? What does that mean?
Well, just saying that we're obsessively covering every little thing that's going on at CBS News because of, our own grudges or personal biases, or just that we're trying to, not give her a chance. But at the same end, every time you go over to Puck, you see a Bari Weiss story, but with a little bit more of a spin that seems to be coming from the Bari Weiss side. Let's just say that. So,
doesn't Dylan have like some billionaires to go defend somewhere? Why is he like getting catty with?
Well, of course. Well, I would also say
This
that
is my personal opinion, by the
Bari
way.
Weiss,
I don't speak for Justin here.
I would say that Bari Weiss, the reason that she's in the position she is now is she spent the last few years flattering and pandering to billionaires and their own personal feelings, and then became their favorite media figure because she seemed to tell them the things that they wanted to hear. And then all of a sudden, she's used that position to advance herself to now all of a sudden be able to put a few $100 million in her own bank account and get herself a position on top of one of the three broadcast news networks. So, it's worked out pretty well for Barry, this little plan of hers. And of course, Dylan is somebody, game respects game, But I mean, we're not gonna, I don't want to really use this in the way of just like, taking pot shots at Dylan Byers. I'm just saying
No.
that I just do think of him as, he has that little buzzer on his desk that goes off every time a billionaire needs defending. So,
all-timer Ashley Feinberg post there.
Let's just start from the beginning here a little bit. So she's from Pittsburgh, right? She's 41. She's Jewish. That's a big part of it.
Yeah, she actually went to growing up, went to the Tree of Life synagogue,
right,
where Bowers ended up
murdered.
committed.
11 Jews. But I should note that there were three different groups of Jewish people who used that facility. So there were more reactionary Zionist, and then there were more liberal, open. I'm not sure which one Bari was, and something we could do maybe on a Who the Hell Is episode with her. But the fact that she's 41 is kind of shocking in some ways, because one, she's younger than me. She's kind of between Jared and me. Which is kind of shocking, considering she's in charge of what at least used to be a very, very, very important network. And then she's a Columbia student activist, and she gets very involved in the campus wars over Zionism. Obviously, that continues to spill over into the conflict, the genocide that starts in the immediate aftermath of the violence on October 7th, 2023. But that we're talking about 2004 to 2007. 2007, she graduates and gets a fellowship with the Wall Street Journal. She writes for the Forward. 2011 to 2013, she's an editor at Tablet.
And I think that time at Tablet is where she really starts to get noticed, right, Justin?
Yeah, I mean, Tablet's sort of a Jewish affairs type of magazine, very opinionated, very much about Israel and Israeli causes. And I believe that's she was already very much about the Zionist causes when she was at Columbia. I mean, she was
part of a group of students that were
trying to get a Palestinian professor fired.
Yeah.
And spoke out against that, which, runs in the face of her supposed free speech absolutism and all that. But, we'll digress. But yeah, at the Tablet, I think that, she kind of found her voice. Going from there, especially during her time at the New York Times, it was where she tried to identify herself as sort of what we'd call classical liberalism, but then pushing back against, the restrictions and the overstepping of bounds from the woke literati that was creating a very censorious environment in America, especially among free thinkers. At the New York Times, she famously coined the phrase the intellectual dark web.
I forgot that was her.
The intellectual dark web was apparently Joe Rogan and Brett Weinstein and these type of folks. They were the intellectual dark web.
Was Ben Shapiro part of the intellectual dark web?
Ben Shapiro was an intellectual dark web too.
Yeah, all these people just coincidentally happen to be her friends.
Yeah,
just being like, these guys are just fucking smart, dog.
I'm gonna start calling all our friends that come on this show. I'm gonna go start giving them a name. Jared, let's work on that. We'll unveil it on Premium.
So before it was intellectual dark web, before it was like wokeness, before whatever, Barry's coming up in a time where, if my memory serves me correctly, we were calling it political correctness. This is like, the start of Obama's second term. This is kind of what is getting traction. So she works for Tablet 2011 to 2013. 2013 to 2017, goes to the Wall Street Journal. She's on the editorial side of things, working on op-eds, op-ed features, book reviews.
Yeah, book reviews.
I forget who told me this. I don't know if it was Chuck Johnson or Luke O'Brien or somebody else entirely, but Chuck Johnson, the like right-wing weird psychopath, he interned at the Wall Street Journal, and I feel like I remember somebody told me that he like overlapped with Bari at some point. I don't remember who this is. It's weird aside. I'm not even saying that just to imply anything about Bari here, but just interesting overlap of where the world is at this time. So she's at the Wall Street Journal. She's getting some notice there, kind of continuing on her path. But when Bret Stephens leaves the Wall Street Journal to go to the New York Times in 2017, Bari goes with him. And I think the New York Times, her time at the New York Times, is what most people know about Bari. And I think it's important to talk about, and I think you'll be able to explain it better than I will, what was going on at the New York Times, why the New York Times hired Bari and hired
Also,
Bret
how
Stephens.
long was she there exactly?
She was there about 3-ish years.
It wasn't long. That's what I thought.
Yeah, 2017 to 2020. She left. Well, I guess we'll get into that when, in a minute. But, her time there, they were trying to get more, I guess you could say, intellectual and ideological diversity on the opinion side, especially under James Bennett.
I thought Bari didn't like diversity hires.
But yeah, they wanted, and Bret Stephens really recommended that. The reason why Bret Stephens was there is so that they could get a little bit more conservative voice on there. Now, Bari Weiss wasn't really deemed a conservative voice as much as like a moderate centrist, explain things on both sides. That's, favorite of hers, try to, and they thought her writing was, I don't know. They loved her prose for some reason. I've tried to go through it and it's overwrought and whatever. But, that ponderous style, works well for the New York Times opinion, I guess. The other thing is because she was on the editorial side at the Wall Street Journal, she was also able to say that she could bring over a diverse group of different opinion voices that they could commission for different op-eds. Because, New York Times opinion is you're not just relying on your paid columnists or your contributing writers. You're looking to bring in like one-off op-eds, for specific subject matter, all that. So, for her, she was also making money on the commissions. She gets like a little kickback on the commissions. That's just the way it is. So that was what she was doing, was besides writing her own columns, she was bringing over, other ones to write their op-eds on specific issues. She was sort of rubbing people the wrong way going into 2020 at times, but, not so much to where it was blowing up into the public. It was all because of the Tom Cotton send in the troops op-ed that created a whole firestorm over at the New York Times, that this all came to a head, where Bari then accused the entire, essentially everyone over at the New York Times of being woke, overly ideologically left, bullying anyone that had any other different opinion, and creating a toxic work environment for herself and others.
And it was also like reinforced by the labor union, if I'm correct. Like they the labor union was too woke at the New York Times, which is something I understand a little bit about because I was a steward at SPLC's union, and I know something about media unions. Right, that they couldn't control when the union was together. They just go like ultra woke, and things were out of control.
But that was her complaint that she went public with. That James Bennett ended up stepping down for publishing the Tom Cotton op-ed about sending in the troops into the cities, which of course 5 years plus later we're seeing that's what they've done.
Yeah, but let's see how that opinion actually plays out.
Saying that, all these elitist type of reporters and radical leftists that were in the newsroom had taken control and had made it impossible for folks like her to be there. The thing is, so she was essentially, going public with this, talking about what was going on in meetings, which was, contradicted by other people that were in those meetings that said, that's not what's going on, what she's saying.
Yeah. If I remember correctly, she was like, they would have meetings at the paper, and while the meeting's going on, she's like sitting there tweeting through it. And then after the meeting, people are like, that's not what happened.
But the thing is, she was doing this, saying that she was being bullied by everybody, but, going public to her now large online audience. It seemed to be in a very obvious manner that she was hoping to get canceled, but, because she was hoping to get fired.
That was a cash cow at that point.
Yeah.
It's like every like stand-up comedian who was popular in the early 2000s suddenly was canceled and selling out, big, 2,000 cap rooms.
Cancel me, daddy.
Being canceled was the best thing that you can have, So that didn't happen for her. She didn't get fired. So she very publicly quit and posted her big resignation letter, which was sort of her manifesto on how she was going to go forward with her career. It was like the mission statement of what became the free press. But I would also want to point out here, her resignation, all that, which was obviously a calculated move on her part, that, when she wasn't getting fired. The other thing that had come out in the years since is that another reason that she was mad is that they weren't allowing her to commission pieces anymore, that they had kind of switched that up. The new, opinion editor that had taken over for James Bennett was like, all right, we're going to have a new process here. And it wasn't just directed at her, but, all of a sudden she wasn't going to be getting that little extra dough in her paycheck for commission.
I want to interject something before we transition to the free press stuff real quick about her. She's a lesbian. She obviously has a history of working with the New York Times before she gets into the free press. It seems like those two things, more than anything else, allow her to sell herself. Now, correct me if I'm wrong. Like I said, I'm becoming a Bari Weiss expert. One day we'll do a who the hell is on her. But like, it seems like those two things, like her being a lesbian, also Jewish, which is a little bit complicated, becomes a little bit complicated after October 7th and her very strong Zionist opinions. Seems like it gives her the ability to sort of sell herself as a kind of reasonable centrist voice, even if her opinions are primarily reactionary. Is that correct? Is that kind of true? Because it seems like the free press, when it's launched, when she kind of gets that off the ground, there's this idea that's like, oh, finally, like a real truth-telling thing that cares about the center rather than a reactionary publication.
I think that's an apt point. I'd also say that that's made her sort of I'm trying to think of the best term here, like a favored pet of these sort of also reactionary right-wing billionaires, or I wouldn't even say right-wing, the sort of just reactionary billionaires who felt like they got bullied by the wokeness of the past decade. And then now they've got their voice of reason that's now going to come out there, and that they can use her as the avatar for all of this. And that's why they were just going to dump all this money into the free press once she came out with this idea. And it helped it helped it even more because she was launching it with her now spouse, Nellie Bowles, who herself has also apologized for being this, radical leftist that has now seen the light, the reasonable centrism that we need in this country, and how she had gone overboard, and that she even wrote a book about it. And then they've talked about it ad nauseum on Bari Weiss's podcast and all that,
I always wonder, how many zeros do you think your bank account has to have before this is the political philosophy you arrive at, which is just that I'm smarter than everyone who is dumb and bad. And
I think it's 6 zeros.
Six zeros. Okay.
when you get to the millions.
Keep pumping
That's
up that
where-
Patreon, guys, and we're gonna get Jared to start turning anti-woke.
Just a little reminder, if you hate this show, there is a link to the Patreon in the description. So that's happening around 2020. In 2021, she launches what would become the Free Press, right? Which is a Substack that is not called the Free Press initially. It's just called Common Sense. Common Sense. What a great name. That I feel like that kind of says it all. Is why don't you read some Common Sense with Bari Weiss? And then the podcast you mentioned, which is called Honestly. Which is
These are like the most cliched terms you could come
it's like
up with.
if you're like
all of
the
these.
dumbest person alive and you're like, damn it, why aren't where's all the common sense and honesty in this country? Bari Weiss is like,
honestly, it's an honest conversation.
what are you listening to? Oh, honesty. Honestly, I'm listening to the truth is what I'm listening to.
Yeah,
Fucking
that's
losers.
right. I'm tired of listening to the lies. I want a podcast that really. But that's also, I think, to that end, how another part of how she markets herself, right? It's like I'm reasonable, but I'm also willing to act. I won't put spin on it. I will actually tell you what the truth is, as if there is some sort of objective truth to really be had on a podcast, which is inherently an opinion format.
Right. She's framing her opinion as the truth, right? But this ends up
Correct.
being hugely successful the next year in 2022. Common Sense is rebranded as the Free Press. It's a contrarian media brand. Justin, what do you know about like how that happened, right? Because plenty of people start newsletters, like Matt Iglesias has Slow Boring, that's making a killing. I mean, there's tons of people that have worked at big institutions, launched newsletters, that have turned out to be quite lucrative, but Bari seems to have had bigger ambitions and turns that newsletter into a bona fide media outlet.
Wasn't like she didn't have a ton of help here either. This wasn't her just, using elbow grease and spit and this churning it out, with just hard work. Her leaving the New York Times, even before that, but her leaving the New York Times really set this in motion, that all of a sudden, all of those tech bros that wanted to, dump money into a media outlet came calling. She's going to all these seminars, retreats, these private events where she would have audience with these folks. She's doing Bill Maher's show every other night, rubbing elbows with basically the top 0.1% of our population in terms of wealth. And they love what she's telling them, right? Apparently, thing is, what we also need to know about Bari is she is charismatic in that she can just, go through a party and tell somebody exactly what they want to hear in such a way that it appeals to that style of person, let's just say, somebody that already wants to be told that they're the most brilliant person around and that their ideas are not being overly criticized. And why are they being criticized so much when they've made such a huge success of their life? And then why are they having to pander to this sort of overly left opinion that's taking over, especially amongst the young folks, right? So they need somebody who's kind of young, which is Bari Weiss, who's there telling them, no, you are exactly correct. And I will make sure that I get that into my media outlet that I'm trying to form. And then all of a sudden she's got millions of dollars pumped into this Substack site of hers that so she's able to hire a couple dozen people. Some may be doing kind of actual reporting, but for the most part, it's centered upon opinion, and the kind of opinion type pieces that they want, which is not always going to be overtly defending the American conservative movement so much as criticizing liberalism.
Yeah, criticizing its
or
opponents.
liberalism of our day.
Criticizing its opponents.
Yes.
And
the anti-Trump way is what we've always talked about.
And running defense, of course, for Netanyahu's project in
and that is
Israel.
Also a huge part of all
that's
this.
Like the huge. That's like
this is the biggest part of why somebody like a David Ellison or others of that ilk are tossing so much money, because they are huge Israeli supporters, and that's their biggest cause is Zionism. And Bari Weiss's biggest cause is Zionism in defending Israel at all costs. And so much of the coverage that has been in the free press has been about justifying the war in Gaza.
What do you know? I asked you before about how MAGA is doing in their response, for example. I trust your opinion on these sort of things. How popular? Well, I almost feel like now the free press is almost a useless appendage now that she's at CBS, right? It feels like something they could discard at some point. It's going to keep going. I know I think it's part of it's sort of part of Ellison's project now. It's sort of yeah. It's just an extra little arm, but she's going to get bored with that pretty soon, right? Because she's got bigger fish to fry. She's got a whole network. But how? Before the purchase of the free press, and before she was given this position at CBS, how popular was the free press? How many people were reading this organically? And the main times it would come up for me were, that Olivia Reingold thing where she was sort of running disinfo on the famine in Gaza, which is one of the most sickening things you can possibly imagine. And she also is just openly mocking dead children in Gaza with that. Horrible. That came up on Colbert, and a lot of people brought it up as a sort of a thing to hold up as isn't this disgusting? Isn't this grotesque? I didn't see a lot of free press pieces organically being like, this is did you read this? This is interesting. Even from people who would be more conservative, even it's not like my parents ever shared with me a free press article. And I'm just curious, how popular was it? It seemed, I can't tell. It seems like smoke and mirrors.
It seems like it kind of lived in its own zone.
I think so. I wouldn't say it was unpopular. I would say for a Substack site, it was doing well. They bragged about that they had over 1 million subscribers, of which over 100,000 were paid subscribers, so that they were bringing in enough revenue to justify a valuation of the 150 million to 250 million that David Ellison eventually paid for it last year. But in terms of who was actually reading it and how it was there were some articles that made the rounds. Specifically, a couple years ago, there was the whole trans clinic whistleblower that went to the free press over here in St. Louis at Washington University about how, she said that she was a person who worked at the children's gender clinic here, that said that, children were being forced into taking hormone therapy or not having, a lot of it was kind of, I wouldn't say debunked, but definitely it came under question. And also, the person who was their whistleblower ended up obviously having ulterior motives, but that ended up gaining a lot of traction and it went places. Also in 24, which was, this was kind of revelatory when we see it in the end, the free press got leaked recordings from the editorial meeting when Tony Dokoupil, then the CBS Mornings host, got reprimanded for his interview with Ta-Nehisi Coates that, was overly aggressive and combative, where he basically accused Coates of being an extremist in essentially a terrorist who was creating a handbook for Palestinians to go and kill Israelis or justify that. And, she obviously had people leaking to her, knowing that that would be the audience that it would reach, or that they would get the right framing from her.
Yeah.
Which is what happened. And then all of a sudden, a year later, she's now running CBS News after denouncing the CBS News editorial leaders at that time for finger wagging at Tony for, being a crappy interviewer. So those were the ones that actually got notice. Like I said, for a Substack site, it was doing well. Whether it deserved to be valued at 9 digits, I'm not sure about that.
Yeah, it's just so, it seems like even by startup standards, which can have some like pretty wacky valuations depending on what's being purchased exactly. If the bragging point is we have 100,000 paid subscribers, I don't know what it costs to subscribe to the free press. Let's shoot high for a Substack, $10 a month, right? That's like, what, $12 million annual revenue? Yeah. So how do you get to 150 to $250 million?
You really don't. And the other thing is, it's been pointed out by many people that her podcast never really brought in a huge number of listeners and viewers, or the other podcasts that the Free Press was putting out. You would typically see, after a day of it being out on whether it was YouTube or the other platforms, a new episode of Bari Weiss's podcast maybe had a few thousand views.
Oh, dude, posting through it does better than that.
Of course we do.
A very, very niche audience, So if you get a few thousand views, apparently you're worth $150 million, by that.
We've gotten
posting it through,
Well, we through it. On particular episodes, we've done a lot more than that. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, Mike, brag. Do you have any rich friends who may want to purchase the last centrist podcast online, which is posting through it?
I want to just interject something real quick here for both of you, because Jared, I would like to hear your point of view about this. A little bit talking about Bari Weiss, she's starting to remind me of another person we've covered a lot more on Posting Through It, which is Charlie Kirk. And I mentioned that because, Kirk was not like necessarily a particularly talented or interesting guy, really. He had the right opinions for certain people who wanted to fund him, and he worked very hard. He was a hardworking guy. He was a hustler. And actually, shout out to Charlie Kirk. Not really, no, don't clip that. But he was balling. Like he was, we could use that kind of hustle. I should have that hustle. I get up in the morning and like, oh my God, my back hurts. Charlie was out there like just grinding all day to build his like filthy, disgusting reality in the United States. And, he finally kind of started to break through right before he was shot. And you look at Bari, and it's like it's not like she's had like I can't think of like an opinion that Bari Weiss has given or that she's written where I'm like, damn, that's like that was a tough one for me to argue around as an opponent of the genocide or as opponent of or as a proponent of what she would call woke politics. That's a tough one to reckon with. It just seems like a lot of postures more than anything else. And I'm just curious, like, if you think about that, agree with that to some degree, that she's just been very good at putting herself in front of the type of people who fund this and works very, very hard to move herself ahead.
Yeah, I mean, for myself, I tend to agree. Bari Weiss and a lot of people in that media zone, I view as performers, right? Like Bari Weiss doesn't actually have ideological commitments, right? The whole thing is this is the free press. We support free speech. And then what did they do? They gave column space to Matt fucking Taibbi to like try to rationalize why he is trying to intimidate Owen Higgins with a lawsuit over the cover art on his book. Yeah. Clearly, from my read of Matt's lawsuit, possibly having not even read Owen's book, but suing him over opinions, right? So it's like, yeah, the free press, real fucking free speech hours over here. It's like, we're gonna team up with the guy who's like suing an author over his opinions. So I don't think Bari Weiss believes anything, really. I feel like that comes through in her writing too, where it's just the prose is very like, you read it and you imagine somebody like, you imagine the the Rockwell painting that's like turned into the meme of the guy standing up and being like, I have something to say. Unpopular opinion time. But it's not, it always strikes me as very attention seeking and not really cemented in anything solid other than I need to get more attention and I need to get more respect and admiration for myself right now.
I agree with most of that. I'd say that she does have at least one very hard-formed opinion, and it's all about Israel.
Oh, Israel does nothing wrong ever.
Yeah, she does call herself a Zionist fanatic, and that she's proud of that. But at the same time, she calls herself she's radically centrist, right? I do think that she's very good at spouting generalized platitudes. That's what she's good at. A person that's not very overtly thoughtful will just listen to that, lean back and go, yes, that is very smart. You are right on the wavelength. You were right there, right into my brain space.
Finally, somebody said it.
Yeah. I can't believe that you could get away with that. That you could put that out there into the atmosphere, into the environment, and then we're gonna have to deal with that now.
I thought it was illegal to say both sides are equally bad.
You read my mind. It was just you're right there. Here's a check for $10 million. Let's get the free press some more, some more people there. So yeah. You see that also with the way that she's running CBS News in its first few months. Not even just installing Tony Dokoupil, but they put those 5 principles of what the show is about, right?
Oh, yeah. Can you remind us? What are those principles?
Oh, I got to look them back up. I know one is we love America.
Yeah.
And we're unapologetic about it, And the other thing is about how they'll tell the uncomfortable truths, and also, we work for you, that you come first, not our advertisers, not politicians, not corporate interests, including the corporate owners of CBS News. Nobody believes that.
No.
Nobody at all.
No.
I mean, we could do a whole other episode on why this is all happening because David Ellison wants to create his own huge media empire, which would be backed by his super rich dad, but that he needs to make sure he gets the buy-in and the favor of Donald Trump. So in doing so, this is one of the reasons why he installed Bari Weiss, so that she could create a version of CBS News that would not insult or make Donald Trump angry.
Yeah, because Trump loves Bari Weiss. Didn't he give her a little kiss on the cheek or something recently?
Yeah.
I want to ask a little bit about this Tony Dokoupil guy. One of the first things that he was assigned to do, it seemed like after she was hired, was interview Dave Portnoy, of all people. Do I have the timing of that correctly?
Well, Dave Portnoy, did get on, did an interview on CBS mornings during that time. I think, not even just the Portnoy interview, there was also tossing her sister out there on the network to talk about lab-created diamonds. I mean, they were doing all kinds of things like that. But yeah, trying to make sure that we had people that would normally not be invited on mainstream broadcast networks to just shoot the shit,
In the case of the Portnoy thing, it was, look, the anti-Semitic harassment of Portnoy that's real. I mean, it was pretty virulently anti-Semitic. It was sort of along the lines of the type of people we saw in that Miami Beach club playing Heil Hitler. It's that crowd. But I guess the question of with that is, who are the people she trusts to kind of bring onto the network? I mean, has there been a kind of purging of voices who she doesn't trust? Are there efforts to hire people who would be considered unconventional, more like free press type people, or even reactionary people? Tony Dokoupil seems to be the the guy at CBS who she picked to sort of promote along the way because he's had controversies. But
yeah, so yeah, she is definitely trying to remake it from the inside out. And bring on more sympathetic voices, or at least sympathetic minds to the way that she wants to run the network. She's now created a new masthead. Now, what we also need to point out is that she's supposed to be sort of an equal to CBS News president Tom Sabrowski, who had came over from ABC News shortly before the merger between Paramount and Skydance when Ellison took over. But Sabrowski is within the normal chain of command. He reports to Paramount's television chief, whereas Bari, as the editor-in-chief of CBS News, reports directly to David Ellison. So whether we think that they're on the same level or not, I think that should tell everyone who's actually running the show there, and that Tom Sabrowski, especially sources have told me over there, is essentially now just becoming sort of a yes man and also is drawing a lot of criticism because he's not standing up for the journalists all there, But in terms of the people that she's bringing on, her deputy is Adam Rubinstein, who, if you don't know, he was over at the New York Times with Bari as an opinion editor, was a big defender of hers. Shortly after she left, he left, and then he became a part of the Free Press, and now he's her deputy there. Charles Perrell came over from the Wall Street Journal and is now the managing editor. When they did their first round of layoffs at CBS News, now this was all probably largely put in motion before she was officially hired. And Ellison was already making it a point that after he bought Paramount, that there were going to be, mass layoffs to cut the fat and try to, get the profitability up. So the first round of layoffs, there were about 1,000 people at Paramount that were fired. Roughly 100 of them came from CBS News. Of the 8 on-air personalities that got terminated, all of them were women, half of whom were people of color. And this was all, post we need to get rid of DEI at CBS, which has also been a big thing of Bari Weiss's from the get-go in their Free Press as an anti-DEI stance. One of those people that got laid off was a senior correspondent, a foreign correspondent named Deborah Patta, who was essentially the main reporter for CBS News in Gaza and Israel, and had been known for doing very fair reporting there. Not really ideologically slanted one way or the other.
Just trying to tell people what's happening in a literal way.
Yes. A few months prior, Mike Huckabee, though, had railed against Mike Huckabee being our ambassador to Israel and another Fox News guy that's in the administration, but saying that, her reporting on her editing of her interview with him was biased and slanted, and she deserves to be fired, if not worse. So that was already out there. We already know how Bari feels about how Israeli reporting should go, or, reporting from that region. So what was also happening behind the scenes is, while she wasn't the one who chose the people who were getting laid off, supposedly, she was able to interject, and Deborah Patta wasn't on that list to get fired. But then, because another correspondent overseas, he noticed that his name was actually on there. He asked, "Can we flip that?" I feel like I'm being targeted because of my pro-Israeli stance over the years, and I'm not being given the chance to actually report over there in that region. I'm stuck over here in Italy, and as like I'm a Rome correspondent and not being given an opportunity to shine. Next thing you know, Deborah Patt is put on the list. She's terminated, even though she's one of the more well-respected correspondents over at CBS. And this other guy, he's saved, and he's also now being given an opportunity to report from that region.
Jeez.
So that's just one example of what's going on there. Sharon Alfonsi, I'm almost certain is not going to last when her contract is up. As people know, Sharon Alfonsi is the 60 Minutes correspondent who was behind the controversially delayed Inside CCOT segment that Bari Weiss at the last minute decided to pull because there wasn't enough buy-in from the Trump administration. They didn't have enough on-record comments.
Let's just press pause on this one. I've been in a lot of newsrooms before, and I know that type of email without naming names or anything like that. Just let's press pause on this one. We don't know. We don't know. I guess I can't let that person go too fast, because she it would look really bad, right? But it may just quietly dispose of her on the 8th day of the week when no one's looking.
I'm also going to point out here that Bari Weiss has been working the phones with certain reporters in the past couple weeks, specifically around this whole 60 Minutes segment, to try to get her side of things and also to kind of paint Sharon Alfonsi as something of a disgruntled employee that isn't helping out, or isn't listening to good advice from her boss, which is now Bari Weiss.
Didn't Bari Weiss kind of go directly to reporters to try to like work them, which I think is supposedly like very atypical for a person in her position.
She did do that. I won't name names on who she's going to. I would say this, but you can read the reports and see who it is that she's going to when you're seeing an insider or a person familiar with Bari Weiss's thinking. That's Bari Weiss telling this. So recently we've heard reports also, about how Alfonsi's contract is up in a few months. And then that leads into more reporting that both Alfonsi and 60 Minutes correspondent, I'd say legendary correspondent Scott Pelley, is also on the chopping block because of his outspoken criticism of Bari Weiss behind the scenes. When she spiked that Inside CCOT segment, the next meeting, he's like, one, why was she so late in this process? She didn't start piping up about this report until essentially, the Friday before it was going to run. And now she's saying we need to add all this stuff. And this is all happening while Trump had started spouting off about how the bosses at CBS were no better than the previous bosses because 60 Minutes is mean and nasty to him again because they allowed Marjorie Taylor Greene to be interviewed and say some critiques about him. So all of a sudden he was mad at 60 Minutes again. So this is all happening at the same time that Bari goes, we need to have more on the record comments and maybe an interview with the Trump administration, even though Alfonsi was saying, we've been trying to do that for weeks. So now you're adding a kill switch into this by saying that if the White House doesn't want to comment, doesn't want to be on record, doesn't want to do an interview regarding a subject like this, that we could just hold the story forever or just spike it. Pelley, during that meeting, was like, one, she needs to stop treating this like a part-time job. She needs to take this seriously. She had many opportunities prior to the weekend to actually go look at this. They had 5 screenings. She didn't go to any of those screenings. It had already gone through standards and practice. It had already gone through legal. They'd already said, okay, it's all good to go. The executive producer of 60 Minutes, Tanya Simon, was all behind it. And then next thing you know, here comes Bari with her list of things that she knows they aren't going to be able to get done prior to Sunday. And the thing is, CBS had already been promoting it on the air.
Yeah.
So you've got Alfonsi and Pelley now supposedly on the chopping block. That's been leaked out to the New York Post. I wonder who got that out there to the New York Post. So,
and there's been a bunch of other weird stuff, like the super bizarre town hall interview Bari did with Erica Kirk, just putting Tony Dokoupil and making him the face of the network is very odd. But yeah, that place is leaking like a faucet, right? Bari is very, I think it's more than fair to like question where her allegiances are. She built herself up by flattering some of the wealthiest people in this country, and then wants CBS viewers to believe that the network's really committed to them. In terms of how that has been reflected, I mean, the 60 Minutes CCOT piece got a bunch of attention. This town hall I mentioned with Erica Kirk got attention. You mentioned that certain reporters or on-air personalities that seem to be at odds with the kind of vision that's animated Bari Weiss's career so far may be up on the chopping block. Have there been other ways, kind of as we're wrapping up here, that Bari Weiss's fingerprints have been seen on CBS News? Or, I mean, it still is a large organization, right? So I'm just curious, like, how much of an effect, from your perspective, you've seen this having on the output of the network so far?
Well, I mean, you brought up the Erica Kirk thing, right? So one, it's very unusual for, let's say, a maybe a top editor or executive, management, let's say, of the newsroom to install herself as an on-air host slash moderator for a network special, which is essentially what this was. Now, the thing is with that, it didn't bring in any ratings for them. People did not want to watch it. But it was also a test run for a new series, I guess, that they're going to do of either town halls with powerful figures, which the next one is supposed to be with JD Vance. Or if it's not town halls, they're going to be one-on-one debates between ideologically different personalities about a very specific issue. So, the member in November when she was at this one conference, and she said that the best example of what I would like to have over at CBS would be these sort of charismatic figures having very respectable debates about things. And the one she pointed to was a free press podcast / debate between Alan Dershowitz and Dana Loesch about the Second Amendment, about
Didn't
how
she
these
say something
were,
like Alan Dershowitz, like kids? We need something that appeals to young people, like Alan Dershowitz.
yeah, that was, she said this is appealing to the to a more broad audience that would bring in younger people, and is like, so the 80-some-year-old Epstein lawyer is going to bring in the.
I can't imagine being more out of touch with the country than being
Well, he
like,
wants to
what do
lower the age
people
of consent. So
what do people crave? They crave the most entrenched establishment political voices being like, well, I respectfully disagree that we should kill all Muslims in the street.
Star Wars character face with like he looks like Greedo's brother, and he's like constantly sort of drooling around his lips while he's talking from an angle where the camera is positioned like directly towards his chin about why we need to lower the age of consent to like 12 or something. Really, really like number one guy that the kids love, actually. Gen Alpha is all over that.
Dude, who could forget all the viral TikToks reacting to Alan Dershowitz complaining that the Curb Your Enthusiasm guy was mean to him?
But getting past that, that series was also promoted as it's now, it'll be sponsored by Bank of America, and it's going to be run by both CBS News and the Free Press. So that's really her installing all of herself into this, while also making sure that you have corporate buy-in to all of this. And then speaking of the corporate buy-in, now we don't know whatever was going to happen with this, because once the pictures got out, maybe the story changed a bit. But there was also going to be Whiskey Fridays with Tony Dokoupil that we saw the set. Now it's like a mock-up set, maybe. I agree that maybe it was for like a private event or something, and maybe not to be run for air, but either way, it's embarrassing as all hell.
Yeah, a little glass of whiskey with Tony. That's what. Fuck news. That's what I really want. I just want a nice glass. Pour myself a little Tullamore Dew or whatever. Sit down with Tony. Kind of feel out the vibes.
Isn't that what everybody wishes they could do? Is have a glass of like fine generic whiskey with the host of a CBS News show. That's what the kids are dying to do, I've heard.
But yeah, and it was hilarious that once those got out, and I'll point out that came out from Zateo's from Thacker. He got a hold of those. I also got a hold of those pictures, different pictures that I could not share because it would have automatically given away who was sending it, But yeah, this was a legit mock-up set. They're calling it mock-up set, but they built this in the New York studio, and people were seeing it, and they felt like they had to send it to folks like me and
I would love to know the bill, like how much it costs.
Yeah, even if it's just a mock-up. They just laid off 100 people, 10% of the newsroom.
MS Now is going to try to compete with hotboxing the studio with Sarah Rule.
With Ari Melber. But they just fired 10% of the newsroom. They're cutting all these costs, they said, but at the same end, they're tossing out all kinds of money for Bari's little visions here. It's like, okay, what if we can create this little segment that'd be nice and fun where you get to sit and, have a drink with our blow-dried anchor who is going to then talk about how much he loves America, and maybe he'll cry about something too. You can have that, and it'll be sponsored by Jack Daniels. And then Jack Daniels has to come out and say, hey, wait a minute, we're not doing anything like this. We did not sponsor this. We have not been contacted. So they'd done this set without even asking Jack Daniels. They're just like, well, maybe we could get Jack Daniels to promote and sponsor this. So this is the stuff that's going on there. I mean, you've got Tony doing, saluting Marco Rubio at the end of a CBS Evening News broadcast as the ultimate Florida man. And he's doing these very soft interviews with whether it's Kristi Noem, Pete Hegseth, Donald Trump himself. And then Donald Trump just sits there and mocks him to his face at the end, saying, you would not have this job if I weren't in office.
Well, it's probably true.
What's he going to say? Is like, he wouldn't have this job if Bari Weiss wasn't the editor-in-chief. And would Bari Weiss be the editor-in-chief if Donald Trump was not elected? All of that, we know that these things are true, right? Why would Ellison hire her if it was a Democrat in office, right? He's really just looking to pander to whoever's in power right now, I think.
Yeah, because he needs the Trump administration to approve all these mergers that he wants to do.
Yeah, that's his main thing.
Yeah.
That's all he really cares about. So right now, this is the way that he's going about it. So for Bari Weiss, she gets to experiment on all these things that she wants, but while also just dipping her beak in the water and getting, whether it's security, bodyguards, private jets, all of this stuff. That's, all for her now, while also making $150 million off of David Ellison buying her blog.
Man, what a gig. I think we should kind of wrap it up here. And I guess we'll see what's in store for CBS News under Bari Weiss and, by proxy, David Ellison, I suppose. But I want to wrap us up with just a vibe check. In your personal opinion, as somebody who has covered media for a long time, knows the ins and outs of the industry, what's the vibe? How's Bari doing? Is she doing a good job running CBS News?
Well, I mean, people aren't watching it any more than they were before. In fact, January looks to be the lowest rated month for CBS News since like 2000, or the lowest January since 2000.
Damn. They better hurry up with the Whiskey Friday thing.
But I mean, based off of just how people are talking to me and other folks like me, whether it's like Oliver Darcy or Stelter or any of those other folks, they're not digging it behind the scenes. It's chaotic too. That's the other thing. No one likes chaos, and she's always run kind of on chaos. That she's not. She constantly has to jump in with new ideas or thoughts or something like that. That's why the Free Press has also had fairly decent turnover there, because people get in there with the thought that it's going to be this place that they get to explore their ideas and thoughts of, heterodox free press, free speech ideas. And then they get in and they have to deal with the constant changes and chaos that surrounds Bari. And this is what's going on at CBS. The launch of CBS Evening News was just marked by all kinds of issues behind the scenes. And it hasn't gotten any better. I mean, just a few days after its launch, they fired the number 2 producer on the show, largely because they didn't like how he was criticizing the way it was running. That's not something that, instills a lot of confidence in your staff.
Yeah. Mike, what do you think? How's Bari doing?
Not well, but I know one thing before we go, which is when I come up with my own version of whatever intellectual dark web branding, you're in it, Justin. So thank you for coming on.
Thank you, guys.